Yeah. You keep that, and then I'll use this microphone.
Oh.
Okay.
You're not gonna be.
What?
I think it would either we had to move it back, or
Oh yeah, because.
or you gotta. I mean, maybe if you be right there. Maybe I don't know. Whatever one you want to do. I can.
I don't want to move.
You want to move it? All right. Probably gonna have to move this just in case. I think you might be in the camera.
So much equipment. Alright, we just getting the
Nah, it's way too dangerous.
That mic is on. Can we have, if I plugged in this room mic, would both of them be on? Or would it like go with that?
Plug it in where?
Oh, I couldn't, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my water in this room.
I don't think that's mine.
Oh.
There's no. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, yeah. Alright.
You want to?
Good. Alright, you want to lead it? Start it off, facilitate it, and then
Damn. Okay.
You got the name Mike. You Mike 1.
I'm Mike 1. I'm Mike 1.
1.
West.
Oh,
I can't hear you.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. All right, anybody that's watching it out there, let us know how the audio sounds.
Are you good? Any echo? Any humming? Any humming in the background?
Audio. How does the audio sound?
That's not real loud.
Yeah, it does sound loud, but I think it shouldn't be that loud since you got the main mic.
Mm.
How loud is anybody that's listening at home? How does the audio sound? Can you hear everybody good? Nobody's gonna comment.
I'm gonna do a Dinez. I learned this from Dinez. Put a 1 in the comments. Put a 1 in the comments.
Put a 1 in the comments if you can hear well. All right, I'm gonna have to check on that. Oh damn, we don't got no internet. That should be fine.
It should be fine.
Can you can hear me when I talk like this?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
But I'm also right next to you, so I don't really know.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right. Is anybody out there watching? Anybody can tell us how the audio sounds?
That reminded me of.
We just gonna start going.
That reminded me of I Am Legend.
Oh,
If there's,
if
there's anybody out there,
oh yeah, he used to do the radio.
I'm broadcasting on all AM.
That's a bad movie.
You think so?
Yeah, it's a bad movie.
Which ending you like better?
I don't like movies that have multiple endings. So I only acknowledge the movie ending.
Kind of quiet. Really?
Right,
We thought it was too loud.
Somebody told us.
There we go.
Who's quiet? Is Ari quiet or am I quiet? Who's quiet?
I don't know if I could be quiet.
Or is just the entirety of the whole thing is just quiet? I guess this is new too, so we ain't ever used it. We haven't used the
doggle,
yeah, whatever it's called.
I think it's a doggle.
All right. Is it still quiet? How about Oh, I'm quiet. Yes, me. I'm quiet.
You quiet.
All
Damn.
right.
You so loud though. You so loud.
Yeah, I know. All right, so. Oh, but then somebody else said they probably talking about Ari sounds good.
I sound good.
Okay.
Could be.
We can work through that though. We're gonna get another mic so that way this isn't something that's happening too often. But we can share this mic.
That don't sound like a good idea.
We can pass it back and forth. That'll probably keep both of us from talking at the same time. Both sound good? Both sound good. Okay.
Christina tripping. Maybe it's your volume. Maybe turn your volume up, Christina. Turn your volume up.
Okay, we're gonna try it like this, and then going forward, we're gonna figure this out a little bit more.
Day one.
First day, and again, we want to encourage people. Every day at 5 o'clock, we will have these group conversations. Every day at 5 o'clock, we'll have these.
Some bit muffled.
A little muffled. Okay. I'll do the main part of the talking with the. We'll do the mics. We'll split the mics back and forth. All right. Again, I'm just gonna stop talking on this mic. I already gonna lead it with the other mic.
I'm gonna lead it with the other mic. All right. You wanna plug it? Turn it off. All right, we're gonna start our group discussion on the new Jim Crow. We've been reading this. Started little bit around one, a little bit around one, round one. We got through, I think, 5.5 chapters. 5.5 chapters. We've been reading it. We'll start this off. I'll ask you this. This is you read this book before. Have you learned something new? Has something new stuck with you your second time around reading it as opposed to the first time?
Let's see. Yes. I feel like something new stuck. I feel like every time I read anything, second or third time, some new information sticks that may have went over my head or may have went unnoticed the first time. I think this time, because we're picking specific sections to read, it gives more time to think specifically about your portion. I think the thing that resonated with me a lot was reading about the no-knock warrants again, reading about her writing this book in 2010 and how prevalent the issues of no-knock warrants were then. And then her stating information from years prior in the 90s about no-knock warrants, thinking about last year with Breonna Taylor and her being murdered in the midst of a no-knock warrant being served. As we were speaking, you bringing up the news story from last year of Rockford of no-knock warrant being served wrongfully to the wrong person. And that also makes me think about Malcolm X and H. Rap Brown in the 60s. They spoke when the no-knock warrants first initially started coming out. They spoke about their disagreement with the no-knock warrants, and Malcolm X even has a excerpt from a speech in which he calls the no-knock warrant anti-Negro law. So I think that was one of the things that maybe stuck with me more this time than last time. I know this is your first time reading it, and you've read probably the most amount of so far of anybody, at least time wise. So what things have you stuck with you from what you've read?
Yes, I've skimmed through it one time before, but it was a real quick little skim through. So this was my first time getting a chance to sit down and really read it and really go in depth with it. I think, but we did have a couple conversations as we were talking, as you were reading it, and a couple of different things. But something you had said that stuck out to me then at the time, then it just kind of ingrained itself when I read it myself, was how they legalize racial bias, how it's legal to racially profile someone, and it's I had never really understood the depths at which it went to. It was really crazy, really. I can't even think of any other way to describe it, that it's illegal to racially profile. It's legal to pull up on somebody in fairgrounds just because they're a black person or a person of color, and do a random search just based on how they look. As long as you say it's their baggy pants, it's not because they're black. It's because of what they were wearing or how their hairstyle was, and all that's perfectly legal, as long as you don't say what the truth is. As long as you don't say the real reason why you pulled them over, the real reason why you stopped them, the real reason why you chased them is because he was black. And again, what you were saying, this book was written 10 years ago. This is a 10th year anniversary, 10-year edition. The things are still relevant when it's talking about the no-knock warrant, or let's talk a little bit about the stop and frisk and things like that. And it's I was able to relay it to things that happen nationwide, also things that are happening here in Rockford.
As we're going back and talking, I'm recalling some more things that have stuck with me in different ways from our most recent reading of this. And I think that originally, when I first read this book, one of the things that stuck with me heavily was pretext stops. And again, on the second go round, I think that resonated very heavily with me again. And I sort of touched on this a little bit, where, because of the density of cities like Chicago and New York and other areas, it's times where stop and frisk is deployed in a more in a more regular fashion and with more regularity. Whereas here, one of the main things that we have is the pretext stops, is driving while black, is driving in a car with somebody that's black, is having a car that's maybe quote unquote too nice for the neighborhood that it's in. And it's one of those things where you become immune to it. I've been pulled over multiple times, and I'm sure that if I've been pulled over before and had a police officer come to the car and sort of look around the car and ask me a few questions and send me on my way, and at the time I just thought, I got lucky, I got a warning and was happy about it, and looking back now, I look at that situation differently, and I see that situation as a pretext stop, as the police officer trying to fish for some reason to be able to search the car or make some kind of arrest. And I think that, unfortunately, and this is one of the things that they spoke on, when things like this happen and somebody's innocent, an innocent person isn't going through a whole bunch of hoops and hurdles to prove that their rights have been violated. They're just happy to be through with the issue and happy to be through with the problem and ready to move on with their day. But in my opinion, some of the people who want to certain people will turn a blind eye if they believe somebody is criminal, or they believe somebody has done something illegal, and then their rights are violated. Certain people will turn their eye. They feel like turn their head the other way, put their head in the sand, and feel like it's justified. The ends justify the means. Whereas opposed to people that are innocent, it pulls a different type of empathy, and it is unfortunate that it takes that to happen. It's more people who would be quote unquote guilty of some type of a crime have their rights violated than people who are quote unquote innocent of any type of a crime. And I think just, that's one of the things that she did speak on. But I think that just reading again about pretext stops made me just think about how complicated it is to try to get people to have empathy towards being pulled over for no reason while somebody's on a fishing expedition. Most people just look at it as if you're not doing nothing wrong, you don't got nothing to hide. And I think at a certain point in time, that was a place where I was mentally in too and psychologically in too. And a lot of the reading of literature and having conversations with people have definitely changed, my mind state on that. I think that it is inhumane, besides the fact of being unconstitutional and illegal, for somebody to be just going on about their day and for them to have to get pulled over and stopped, and maybe their car gets searched, and maybe they feel as if some type of intimidation tactics are being used, and this person has done nothing wrong besides being born with a certain color skin or being born and living in a certain neighborhood, and now they have to deal with basically Gestapo tactics, and especially for communities in which this happens in a regular basis. I think that the pretext stops were something that stuck with me heavily the first time reading it, and then even just going back again, it's sticks real heavy with me.
Some of the things that really stuck to me is just hearing the statistics out loud, or not out loud, reading the statistics. Sometimes you figure them out, or you kind of think that's the case, but once you actually see the facts behind the situation, the research behind the situation, it's can be mind-blowing just how staggering those numbers are. I think I was trying to relay this back to Rockford, but I couldn't remember the exact number about how many. Let's see. This little passage right here. In New Jersey, the data showed that only 15% of all drivers on the New Jersey Turnpike were racial minorities. Yet 42% of all stops and 73% of all arrests were a black motorist. And that got me thinking about, I can't remember the exact numbers, maybe you'll have better knowledge about it, but I think it was in 2019 when that story got put out of the yes, about locally. Yeah. I couldn't remember. I thought it was 3%. Yeah, three times. 3 times as often. Yeah. It was 3 times in Rockford. It was black African Americans are 3 times more likely to be pulled over while driving. That's just through driving. And so there's something else. There's one other thing that I've. This one right here. This one. I remember this kind of happening when I was a kid, but I was too young to understand how how crack was labeled differently than cocaine, than powder cocaine. How if you got caught with crack, it was such a more severe sentence than powder cocaine. It was 100 to 1, 100 to 1 if you had to get caught with 500 grams of powder cocaine as opposed to 5 grams of crack cocaine. That would give you the same amount of sentence. Is there any type of statistic like that that really kind of stuck with you, or?
I don't. I think in the passage that I read, there were a few different statistics that in the reading they stood out. I think as I'm trying to think back to specific things. One of the statistics that stood out to me heavily was the amount of militarized weaponry that police departments have gotten from the federal government. The amount of money that police departments have been allocated by the federal government in as long as they're pursuing of this drug war and these drug laws. I think too, one of the things that happens for me as we go through and we talk about these things and we read these things is I always think about the sometimes the words and the numbers can cloud the fact that it's human beings that these things affect. And those numbers start to seem sort of arbitrary as you start, speaking them and saying them over and over again. But I think that it's important to point out that with the crack cocaine, with the disparities in crack cocaine and how powder cocaine, with the sentencing, there's, multiple generations of, even though it may be predominantly black families, multiple generations of black families, of white families, of other families of color who more than likely were people that were living in situations of poverty, who felt as if the best way or maybe the quickest way or the most efficient way for them to make money was through the black market and was through selling drugs. And even though it has been proven, again, that crack is not 100% more harmful for human beings than powder cocaine was, there is a plethora of people who, because their access was to crack cocaine, or the access that they had was to people who purchased crack cocaine, that their lives ended up being destroyed from that. I think that we have to keep in mind this. It's one of the things she speaks about in there, but this idea that people talk about. I grew up with a father that was not in the household. He spent time in and out of jail. It's his father, from what I understand, spent time in and out of jail. Jail and prison is just as much of a generational cycle and a generational curse as poverty is, or as addiction is. Most people, and it's not in this book, but in another book I read, they speak about how it's lower class, middle class, and upper class in America. And it's very rare for anybody who was born in lower class to die in middle class. It's very rare for anybody born in middle class to die in upper class. It's very rare for anybody to be born in upper class to die in lower class. So we are pretty much relegated to the situations that we are born in. So to hear about people who, because of the situations they were born in, nothing less, there's nothing that says that black people are more likely to sell drugs than white people. So it's very reasonable to believe that at the time in which these laws were being executed differently for different races, that it was just as many white people selling powder cocaine as it was black people selling crack cocaine, or it was just as many affluent people selling powder cocaine as it was poor people selling crack cocaine. But that affluence allowed not only for them to be able to deal with the criminal justice system better, but it also allowed for them to not have as harsh of penalties as people who are poor, people who are from low poverty. So I say all those things to say that you can see how, as you read these things, these cycles continue to go, and these cycles just happen over and over again, and generation after generation gets caught up in these things of going to prison and selling drugs, or dealing with the possibility of being killed while being in the streets. And you can see how the government has not looked at this as something as an issue to try to fix, or an issue to try to solve. They've looked at it as an issue to try to contain, as an issue to try to push to the side, to criminalize, not to actually address and to try to fix, to stigmatize, not to alleviate. And so I can be long-winded when I speak, but I guess the thing that I'm really trying to get to is that even though the statistics can be very staggering, I think even more staggering is thinking about the amount of people and human beings whose lives have been altered and destroyed by what those statistics end up being.
And just going off that about the people actually affected about it, she touched on a little bit about the seizures that police do. I'm going to read a little bit about that. The Western Area Narcotics Task Force (WANT) became the focus of a major investigation in 1996, when almost 63,000 was discovered hidden in its headquarters. The investigation revealed that the task force seized large amounts of money, but also small amounts, and then dispensed it freely, unconstrained by reporting requirements or the task force mission. Some seizures were as small as 8 cents. Another seizure of 93 cents prompted the local newspaper to observe that, once again, the officers were taking whatever the suspects were carrying, even though by no stretch could pocket change be constructed to be drug money. And these were individuals who may have committed a drug crime at some point. That's something that somebody close to me had to go through, where it didn't matter if he got pulled over in a traffic stop, or he was just walking down the street, or he was at a club. If he was there and the police were there and they talked to him, or they had some type of interaction with him, they were taking whatever money he had on him. They were taking whatever things he had on him. They were going to take any of his belongings that they deemed valuable, just because of prior drug convictions, not anything that he had on him. We also listened to the speech that she had gave. We've listened to that a couple of times. Is there anything that has stuck out to you with that?
Yeah. We'll have the playlist up where all of these speeches are at, so people can go back and watch them and listen to them. I'm sure we'll play multiple of these things different times. I think that what stuck out to me, and it's what made me. I think it's what made me feel very close to the message that Michelle Alexander speaks about. She talks about point in time in which she's working for a law firm, and they put billboards up, and they're asking people to come in and tell them about any type of racial profiling or racial discrimination that they've faced while in the city. I think it was in Oakland, from the Oakland Police Department. But it was qualifications. She wanted people who had no felony records. It was multiple qualifications. The main thing was that she wanted people with no felony records, because they were looking for a person to be basically the Rosa Parks, the headline person for this criminal lawsuit, for this civil lawsuit against the Oakland Police Department. And so she's going through all of these different people. When a young man comes into her office, the young man has all of these papers. He has pictures and names, and he has all the information necessary. And he's telling her how these police officers have been illegally searching people in his community. They've been planting drugs on people in his community. They beat people up in his community. And, he wants something to be changed about it. And so she's going through and just asking him questions. And so she goes through and she asks him the routine question about if he's ever been convicted of a felony. And he says yes. And she says that, it threw her off because they were screening applicants, and anybody who said that they had been convicted of a felony, they wouldn't get to her desk because they felt that somebody being convicted of a felony would be basically a bad spokesperson for the case, for the lawsuit. And so she, tells him after he says that he has a felony that, she can't help him, that they need somebody without a felony to go forward. And the young man tells her, he didn't do what he got convicted of. They planted the drugs on him. It's not his fault. He wants to help. He wants some change. And, she tells him that it's nothing that she can do for him, and the young man gets upset, and he tears all the papers up, throws the papers in the air, tells her that she's just like the police. She's no different, and he storms out of the office, and she says that, some time passed. She was in Oakland doing a interview for a neighborhood type TV show or something like that. And after she finished the interview, the young man burst into the studios, and he had some flowers that he had, and he apologized to her for the way he acted. Said he shouldn't have acted that way, and said he wished he could have found more flowers, but he could just find his pot that was in his grandmother's yard, and he stuffed it in her chest, and then he ran off. And she went to try to go get him, but by the time she got outside, he was getting in his car and he was taking off. She couldn't speak to him, and so some weeks later passed, and she was looking at a newspaper, and on the front cover of the newspaper, it was a story that said Oakland Police Department officers in the Oakland Police Department were fired and were facing prosecution because of corruption. And one of the officers that was at the front, the names of the officers that were in the story were the names of the officers that the young man had told her about. And one of the main people that was bringing this information to the forefront was that same young man that she had turned away those months ago. And she said that it wasn't really until that moment when she was reading the newspaper and seeing all of these things come to fruition that she understood that he was right, that she was just as bad as the police department, and that she was just like those other people, because the second that she heard the word felony and heard that he was a felon, she went mute. She didn't want to hear anything he had to say anymore, and so she realized that in that moment that there was no way for her to try to fix these issues she was speaking about with mass incarceration, with racial discrimination and racial bias, if she was going to turn away people who had been criminalized, people who had been arrested, or people who had felonies. One of the things that the young man said to her was that, good luck trying to find somebody in my neighborhood who they haven't gotten to. They've gotten to all of us, and that makes me think about growing up. And I don't know if I have maybe a couple of friends in my life who haven't been arrested, but the majority of the friends that I have in my life, they've been arrested. They've been to jail. Some of them have been to prison. Some of them have been on parole and probation for umpteenth amount of years, and so that resonates with me heavily. The idea that they've gotten to everybody. It's nobody that doesn't have a criminal record. It's nobody that's not in the system. And so hearing her say that, and hearing her be able to admit that change in her perception and that change in her mind state was very endearing to me, because I've had to change a lot of my perceptions, a lot of my mind state in certain things. And I've learned that with this, because of how the criminal justice system, if you're not inside the criminal justice system, it's very hard to understand the dynamics of it. If you don't know somebody that's inside of it, it's very hard to be empathetic towards it. And for me, these last 10 months has been a plethora of meeting people in and out of this system, meeting people who have family members in and out of this system, and seeing that everybody's situation is totally different. There's no absolutes to this. And so the idea that someone having a felony or a criminal record or a criminal arrest negates them being assaulted, or negates the fact that they may be innocent, or negates the fact that they're still human beings, or even negates the fact that if let's say somebody did commit a robbery, or somebody is selling drugs, or somebody did do a shooting, as a society, we have to decide if we want to show that person a better way, if we want to try to make sure that that person can prevent someone else from doing those things by rehabilitating them, or if we just want to punish that person, if we just want to get that person away from our proximity, if we just want to make sure that we don't have to be in danger of being robbed, or we don't have to be in danger of being shot. And so all of those things, for me, listen, that's one of the things that sticks out to me very strongly from the interview, the speech that she gave.
Just going off that about people how are treated differently if they're a felon, or if they've been arrested, or they're almost dehumanized by being labeled a criminal. And a lot of times people who support the police will fall into that trap of, oh, he deserved it. But what's not really looked at is maybe the people who do commit the crimes also believe that. I had someone tell me that they were on the ground, they had been arrested, they were on the ground facing the cement, handcuffs in the back, and the cop came up, kicked him in the ribs, and pepper sprayed him. And he felt like that was just a normal thing, because he felt like he was a criminal. He had been in and out the system. He had been labeled a felon, so he just thought, oh, that's just a thing that happens to felons. When really, that should never happen. That's a human being. That's a human being. That man had a family. That man had people who loved him. He's not some type of I don't even know how to describe. He's not some type of monster or some type of evil being. He's still a person with people that care about him. And the same type of thing with Mike Sago. People to this day treat Mike Sago as he was the most evil person to have ever existed, and he was a 16-year-old boy that was unarmed. He was I say allegedly because he was never found guilty of his crimes, of the crimes that they charged him with. He was killed before that. Mike Sago was 16 years old and unarmed and crawling away when he got shot in the back. So just a little something to touch on that. I was going to ask you something. How do you say this name? Adolf Leons? The one in L.A.?
Oh, man. I got to see it.
You got to see it? You got to see it,
that
okay.
Was hard. That was one of the things yesterday. I was
Yeah.
the names.
Yeah, it's Lyons.
Yeah.
Is Leons?
Yeah.
His story definitely just kind of, I don't even know, it just kind of really stuck with me. I've been thinking about it for the rest of the day. And we kind of talked about this before. What do you think of that? What do you think of that?
Wait, refresh me again.
He got stopped, I believe, for a turn signal. Signal, the cops
got him out the car.
The cops told him to get out the car. He got out the car, did everything he told them to do. He put his hands up on his head, and they patted him down, searched him, and after they searched him, he put his hands down. They slammed his hands back up, slammed him on the ground, or slammed him on the hood of the car, and ended up putting him in a chokehold, which he ended up passing out, and he woke up. He had urinated on himself. He had defecated himself, and just reading through the different legal cases was astonishing. Really, it's just how it doesn't ever stop. It doesn't ever really stop. Whether it's the police and it's the prosecution and it's the juries. The juries. That's something I never really had thought of or never really put any mind to. That how much discrimination has gone into the juries. They talked a little bit about how when you pick the juries, I forget exactly what it's called, preemptive strike. Yep. How they can preemptively strike you just based on your hairstyle or the type of clothing you're wearing, and basically they can, as soon as you walk in the door, you are racially profiled and you can be stereotyped into not being able to serve on the jury.
I think to bring back to the Leon's case, the Leons, to bring it back to that, I remember I had to refresh my memory, but I remember one of the things that stuck with me the most about that was that, and I think this goes towards, and I don't want to go back too far, but one of the things that led to the change in the civil rights era and that led to some of the differences in the racial issues that we now have is that in the 50s, in the 60s, there were judges who became more empathetic towards the racial issues in America. I hope I'm saying that the right way. I know that a lot of people, it took me reading through a lot of the literature that I'm reading through now to understand some of these things, but there is a lot of, every step there's more discretion. Police officers have discretion. They pick and choose who they pull over, who they stop, who they treat one way, who they treat a different way, who they charge with what, who comes into the jail in one piece, who comes into the jail assaulted. They, decide who they will harass. They decide who they will plant drugs on, who they won't plant drugs on. They decide who will get a ticket or a citation. So there's a lot of discretion at the police department level. Then you go up another level, and I've heard different people say that they believe the prosecution has the most discretion. And then there's, you're at the discretion of the prosecution where they decide what they charge you with. In Illinois, I don't know how this works in other places, but in Illinois, they have up to 30 days, I believe, where they can change the charge that they got you with. I know multiple people who have been charged with crime A, and when time passed, they are now charged with crime B. So that's the discretion of the prosecution. The prosecution decides. I've gotten arrested for having a small amount of weed before. I got arrested for the small amount of weed, went to jail, got bonded out, had a court date. I went to the court date. As I'm sitting in the court date, lawyer comes up, public defender and the state's attorney comes up to me. State's attorney, public defender tell me that my charges have been dismissed and, I can go on about my day. There's somebody else who had that exact same amount of weed and got caught and ended up being on probation or parole or got caught up in the system, and then because they missed a court date or they messed up on a drop, they ended up, being put behind physical bars instead of the virtual bars that she speaks about. That's discretion. And it may not always be, racially motivated. I think that one of the things that I'm at a place now where whenever I'm having a conversation with somebody, excuse me for not looking at the camera neither. When I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm okay with a person that's in denial about racial issues. If they're speaking into a point in which they're not in denial about humanity issues, because then we can get to a place of you understanding the racial issues better. I think that honestly, the problem isn't so. The problem is we have a race problem. I'm not negating that fact. But we also have an empathy problem. We have a humane problem, a human problem, a human connection problem. Numerically, in America, it is true. More white people are killed by the police department because it is numerically more white people in America. It's an issue that white Americans feel as if, when they see a white American being killed by a police officer, that, well, he deserved it, or, they're not going to do anything to try to fight against the system or to try to get justice for that man's family or for that person's family. I think that's an issue. I think that it's an issue that black people, when they hear about someone being shot by a police officer or being assaulted by a police officer, that they go to the mind state of, well, what did he do? Or, well, he shouldn't have ran, or, well, he shouldn't be committing crimes. That's, because we're in a place now where that is white people viewing things happening to white people and black people viewing things happening to black people, and both times viewing it from a lack of an empathetic understanding standpoint. And I think a lot of that comes from people being far removed. Dr. King spoke about it being two different Americas. And I think, honestly, it's more than two different Americas now. But there's definitely a difference in the young man who lives on Pepper Drive and what his reality is, and the young man who lives in Fairgrounds and what his reality is. And until we get into a place where we understand that neither one of them consciously made any kind of decisions to determine those realities, that they were born into these realities, and that those realities will shape more of their life than they will ever have the chance to. Where you're born decides almost more than, you can go through your whole life and you can never overcome where you were born at. That is a real thing. You can go through your whole life and never overcome who your parents are. You can go through your whole life and never overcome poverty. You can go through your whole life and never overcome physical disabilities or mental disabilities that you may have. And so I think that we have to get to a place of empathy and human connection, so that way when things like what happened to the young man who got pulled over by the police officers and then got assaulted by the police officers, so that way the people that were putting in these positions, whether it be the prosecutors, whether it be the public defenders, whether it be the judges, that they're in a place where they can have empathy towards the situation. I remember Denzel being assaulted and being beat up and being in the courtroom, and he's virtually on Zoom, and he's speaking about they beat the fuck out of me. They beat the fuck out of me, judge. And the judge just worried about going through the system. He don't care about him being beat up. He worrying about when the bail hearing's gonna be, what the next case is. Probably worried about what he gonna eat for dinner. But he's not worried about the fact that this man got beat up and got assaulted because he didn't get elected and put into his position by having that empathy. It's the same issue with police officers, in my opinion, and with elected officials. We've gotten into a place as a society where empathy is not a priority, and so people have been elected without needing to show empathy. And so then when these moments happen, where we need empathy, you end up with a situation with a mayor like Tom McNamara where there is no empathy in those situations.
You touched a little bit on parole, and this little stat just really stuck out to me of the nearly 7.3 million people currently under correctional control, only 2.3 million are in prison or jail. The rest are on probation or parole. That really is astonishing to me. When you put somebody on parole for 4 years or 10 years or 8 years, you're not hoping for rehabilitation. You're not hoping that, I'm going to put you on this 10-year program so you get better. You're hoping to catch them. You're hoping to put them back in prison, put them back through the system, and have them become a repeat offender. Another thing that really stuck out is the high turnover of nonviolent offenders. She talked about how the the violent offenders stay in prison for a longer sentence of time, but the nonviolent offenders will cycle in and cycle in and cycle in. So where it may be half and half, but the amount of nonviolent offenders is, I believe, I don't remember the exact number, but is incredibly more than that of the violent offenders. She had wrote a new. We were reading this, the 10th anniversary edition. I didn't get a chance to read the new preface. Preface.
Yeah,
Preface. All right. What did you think about that? What did you think about the new?
Well, first, I think it was very long compared to her original preface. But in the midst of reading the preface, and this was something that I sort of spoke on yesterday, and it's been multiple things in the midst of all of this that have struck with me heavily, and a lot of that is based on my experiences before these things, and so. Before all of these things happened, if somebody would have asked me about issues facing the black community, I would not have been able to articulate how those issues that the black community are facing, there are multiple other communities in America faces a black man, that there are Latina women who face similar issues, that there are at the issues that I face as a straight cis black man, that there are transgender black women who face those same issues, and that you have to, one of the things that has happened to me is that my vantage point has changed, and I feel that I try to keep it always changing and constantly changing. And so in the midst of reading that, the thing that has stuck out to me the most in that new preface is how she connected mass deportation to mass incarceration. The thing that stuck out to me the most was how she spoke about how, even though in this book she spoke about black men facing the criminal justice system and facing new Jim Crow, how that affects black women, and how black women and black trans folks face these same type of exploitations and oppressions and assaults and intimidations and terroristic actions from police departments and inside of jails. The way in which she spoke about how capitalism is tied into the mass incarceration and tied into these police terrorism issues. The way she encapsulated white supremacy and tied that into mass incarceration and into all of these things. The intersectionality of the preface is, I think, what stuck out to me the most as I'm going through and reading things now, and I think that's one of the main things that I think we have to collectively get to as a city, is understanding that intersectionality, understanding where our struggles meet with other people's struggles, so that way we don't feel the need to struggle alone. It's not in this book, but it is in a book that we will read in the future, where they speak about these two things. They speak about the book is called The Purpose of Power by Alicia Garza. She was part of the Black Lives Matter movement that started, one of the three founders. But what she speaks about is united fronts and popular fronts. She calls a united front is a collective or a group of people who have long-term goals, medium to long-term goals, in which they all agree on those medium to long-term goals. If you laid out 10 things on the agenda, they would agree on 8 out of 10 things, or 9 out of 10 things, or even everything on the agenda. They would all be in agreement. They have long-term goals that they're moving towards. She spoke about how important it is for us to build these united fronts. But she spoke about how equally important it is for us to build popular fronts. And she spoke about popular fronts being a group of people that come together to achieve a short-term or a medium goal. And that those group of people, if you lay down 10 things on the agenda, they may only agree on 2 things that's on that agenda. But those 2 things that they agree on is what they are in concert working together to get towards. And she spoke about how you cannot have, popular fronts until you first get united fronts, but that popular fronts are the things that movements are made of. Those are the things that you can get change from, and you can get some tangible things from. And I think that, in my opinion, May 30th in 2020 in Rockford was the closest that we've got into a popular front. There were the amount of people that was there. If you were to put 10 things on the board, you would probably only get one thing that all of those people agreed on, and that was that people should stop being killed by the police. And that was evident in the fact that people left at different times. People argued and disagreed with the tactics that were being used at different times. And that's because, it was a united front with a bunch of it was a popular front with a bunch of many united fronts together. And so I think that we have to, in my opinion, that preface speaks about how important it is for us to understand intersectionality, understand mass deportation, and how that affects undocumented folks in America. It's important for us as a cis black man and as black men in general. Important for us to understand the homophobia and the transphobia that is deep within our community, and that's not. I don't say that to say as if it's deep within the black community because the black community is an exception to the American society. I say that to say that the black community has now been ingratiated and sort of endeared into portions of the American society, and the American society is a homophobic society. It is a transphobic society, and it's a violent society. It's an oppressive society, a capitalistic society, and so it is impossible to think that you could become ingratiated or a part of that society, and some of those things will not rub off on you or become part of you. So as a black community, we have to be better at intersectionality and understanding intersectionality, and I think that's something that we are very good at and very strong at. And there's you're not going to see people on a corner doing a Stop Asian Hate rally and see a bunch of black people stopping by, and heckling it, or a free get kids out the cages demonstration going on and seeing a bunch of black people coming by and heckling it. But we are in a place where sometimes black people feel as if the light is being shined away from the issues that affect the black community, and those issues haven't been fixed yet. And so I think that me personally and us collectively, one of the things that, I think is important for us to do is to continue to build on that intersectionality.
Want to keep going?
Somebody else want to hop
Anybody
in and
else
talk?
wanna-
Anybody else want to?
Anybody else got any input?
I looked at everybody. I looked at everybody equally. I looked at everybody. I didn't just look at her.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about the book.
Talking about the book.
We're just talking about the book.
Yeah, talking about the book. Yeah.
You want to hop in?
Ari can't leave though. Ari's facilitating.
Okay, okay. I'll start with the same question I asked last week. Is this your first time reading this book?
Yeah.
This is your first time reading this book. What type of in your little section that you read, what type of things stuck out to you? Then through your first time reading it.
Yeah, so I was actually having this conversation with my mom. Hi, Mom, if you're watching. She was watching earlier. But I was having this conversation with her, and I said that there was a few things that I felt like I had to reiterate while I was reading the book. Just because they stuck out to me so much, I had to make sure that if there were people watching, that they also caught that. So a few things that I had highlighted, one of them was basically speaking about the, as you could say, the ratio of black scholars to black incarcerated people, and they were actually specific about calling out Chicago, Illinois, and the state of Illinois. So there was one point where they were talking about the year 1999. There was, I believe, 900 and something African American men that were given a bachelor's degree or had graduated from an Illinois State University with a bachelor's degree. And the next year, being 2000, there were about 7,000 something black men being released from Illinois state prisons just for drug charges. So that really stuck out to me, to the point where I had to stop and go back and it was so powerful that I was like, wow, that is a reality. That is a statistic. That is a factual statement that is being made, that, you know, they're more likely, not by their own accord or their own wish or their own, you know, dream. It's nobody's dream to be incarcerated, but were more likely to be imprisoned than they were to be graduating with a bachelor's from a state university. So that was definitely one of the things that had stuck out to me, and it did so much so that I made it a point to reiterate it at the time that I was reading it.
Anything more to add? I'm gonna keep going now. I'm gonna bounce it back to you. Another thing that really stuck out to me in the passage that I was reading is the inadequateness of the public defender's office. She ran through a couple of different statistics that I can't really remember right now, but it made me think of, I just read this story maybe a couple of weeks ago about somebody had been in jail for about 3 years, been in the Winnebago County Jail for 3 years, and they had gone through, I think, 4 different public defenders. The turnover rate in the public defender office is incredibly high. The conditions aren't good. The pay isn't good. So it's not a desirable job to where somebody can get a fair trial because they don't have adequate legal representation. What are you ready? What are you doing? Okay. So is there anything in the book that you were able to relate right back to Rockford? Is there anything, like for me, I saw she had touched a little bit on how the police get to use their own discretion and where they go, who they arrest, and where they go to arrest people. And they almost, what really stuck out to me is they almost set up these, she had called them ghetto, they almost set up these ghettos in order to arrest these people, in order to exploit these people. The city created the ghettos. The city segregated the black community, the African American community, into this specific area that the police go out and they target and they exploit and they disproportionately arrest these people and target these people, and they frequent these high areas. And when you think of the scope team, the Rockford scope team, we had just a situation with Denzel. He's over there on School Street and he ended up getting his face beat to like that. These scope team officers, these Rockford Police Department officers, they target these areas of go ahead.
Impoverished areas.
Target these impoverished areas. Is there anything that you could relate?
Yeah, so in regards to the criminal justice system after the fact, after people being released, they talk about basically all these factors that work against incarcerated people once they leave. And I believe it was talked about in Michelle's speech that was played shortly after we started experiencing technical difficulties. But you know, they talked about in the book, and she talked about as well, how once you're released from prison, you're not necessarily released from this second class citizenship, basically this this idea that you are less than because of having served time. And again, it's one of the things I was speaking to my mother about, but I touched on how difficult they make it after you're released from prison to get a job. And she was talking about, you know, every time you go to apply for an application, that you got to check the box that says that you're a convicted felon, and as soon as they look at that, they essentially throw your resume, or they throw your application in the trash. So that, along with the fact that it also touches on how you're able to be legally discriminated against on not necessarily just job applications, but financial aid. You're unable to apply for any type of government aid once you've been convicted as a felon. You're not able to arm yourself, no matter what the offense is. It didn't necessarily touch on that, but just as a general knowledge, no matter what the offense is that you're convicted of, pretty much 10 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to arm yourself. You're no longer going to be able to provide any kind of firearm defense for yourself. And then in addition to that, housing. You can't have certain financial aid, certain government aid. You can't apply for Section 8 housing or anything like that. In most places, actually, if you are living in Section 8 housing, you're not allowed to have a felon live with you either. If they find out that you have somebody who is a convicted felon living with you, they can legally kick you out of where you're living. So say, a family, the father of the family gets convicted of a crime, and they're living in Section 8 housing. He gets a felony. He goes away for a couple years. He comes back. He can no longer live with his family in that Section 8 housing, regardless of whether he has a job, regardless of whether he's trying to reintegrate into society what they would call the right way. Regardless of any of that, he cannot, come home and live with his family. And so all of those things I've seen others go through, and then I know it's a situation that I didn't necessarily see or experience, but I know to be true for my own family and my own father. He was convicted of a felony at one point, and it made life incredibly difficult for him. He didn't get all of the same opportunities prior to the felony. He was in the military. He's, a veteran, and he was not given the same benefit of the doubt afterwards. He's not treated the same afterwards because now all they see is a black man who was a convicted felon. So, even though he's a veteran, even though he's a father, even though he's, any number of things, all that people look at him now when they see is a second-class citizen because he has been convicted of a felony and he is a black man. So it definitely, I see a lot of that, specifically in the Rockford area, not just in my own family, but I see a lot of that same, they make it hard. They make it incredibly hard to go back to the life you lived, or anything similar to the life you lived, where you got a family and jobs and housing and all of a regular suburban lifestyle. You can never go back to that once you basically once you've been convicted as a felon, you can never go back to that. You can never, have the same opportunities. If you get a job, if somebody's willing to hire you, you're likely not making livable wages unless you are fortunate enough to start your own business, which we have also seen from people in the Rockford area. We've seen people be able to get out, but I know that for the person that I'm speaking about, if we're cool to talk about that, the person who owns 15th and Chris, he used to be incarcerated, and he got out and he was able to start a business. It's a really nice business. You guys should check it out. Not trying to plug anybody, but he was, but that's an exception to the rule. That's not everybody's experience, and the majority of the time you're going to have people that have the experience that it's incredibly difficult to reintegrate into society once you've been convicted of a felony. So that part of the book, when I was reading through that, I was definitely like, yeah, there's a lot of people around here going through that. And not only that, if you can't get out and make it, it makes it even more easier for you to quote unquote reoffend and go right back into jail or right back into prison. And so it's basically this continuous loop or continuous cycle to keep people who they've, pushed into prisons and jails to keep them coming back. So, you see a lot of that in the Rockford area, a lot of people with what they would call, super long rap sheets and things like that. You see a lot of people with those things because they make it incredibly difficult to reintegrate into society once you've already been convicted of a crime, especially a felony.
And while we're on the giving shout outs, if you are a felon or if you have a marijuana offense or some type of minor offense, I would advise anyone to go to reach out to David Black or reach out to, I believe it's Prairie Legal Services. They help with expungements a lot. They help a lot with expungements and getting those offenses removed from your sentencing, from your sheet. I got one more question, then we're going to wrap things up. I got one more question. This book was written in 2010, it got published, right? 2010, 2011? Yes. All right, so that's 2 years into Obama's run as president. Yes. And she touched a little bit about it in the book, but where... talk a little bit about that and how he had reduced the crack offense. Oh, yeah. He reduced sentencing for crack to like 28 to 1 instead of 100 to 1. Yeah. What do you think about? I know we've talked through our discussions and through other books that you have read. They have touched a lot more about on the President Obama's run as president. What do you have any thoughts just about that?
Okay. I got to be cautious with my words. My mom loves Barack Obama, so I don't want her to watch this and get like a crazy inbox or a crazy message. Again, this is another one of those things where I talk about where I feel my vantage point is changing, and I've had to stay fluid and I've had to stay flexible with things. She spoke on there about how people took their children to the ballots, to vote for Obama, and that's a real thing. My mom's very school is a very important thing to her, and education. And I remember, like, I almost 100% sure I left school early, and she wanted to make sure that she was able to be in the lines to vote. And she took me with her to vote. I wasn't old enough at that moment yet to vote in 2008. I wasn't 18 yet. But I was there with her when she casted the ballot. I was there with her, when we went home, and I remember watching the news all night as as he was winning. I remember, her being real emotional when he won. I remember I had an uncle that I was real close with, an older uncle. He's like a great uncle type thing. And he went to, he didn't really, it was like a joke in the family. He was real frugal, didn't really spend a lot of money. But, he wore the same suits for years and decades and stuff like that. But, family used to always say he was, secretly rich. You just would never know it. But he spent a bunch of money to go to D.C. and see, Obama's inauguration. Black people who I had never seen emotional or even speak about politics were, emotional and becoming political. And so I do see the importance of, Angela Davis always says that Barack Obama was a condemnation of white supremacy and white supremacy beliefs and things like that. And so I do believe symbolically Barack Obama was very important. And I do believe that symbols are very important. But I also think that the idea that Barack Obama led in a new type of America, was something that was believed and, was false. It was something that similar to the token integration that took place in the 60s. It was something that had a lot of hope and a lot of promise, but it didn't pan out to be exactly what black people expected it to be, or even people or poor people or any people, it was a movement behind Obama, and it did end up being what a lot of those people hoped that movement would be. One of the things Angela Davis speaks about, the reason that was is because it was not enough leverage exerted on Barack Obama, because people felt that they had got the job done by getting Barack Obama elected, and now that they could sit back and Barack Obama would fix all of these things just based off the fact that he was black and he was a Democrat. And those things were all false. That the same movement that got Obama elected needed to be the same type of movement that pushed Obama to change things and to do things, instead of making it a 28-1 disparity, making it an equal disparity. Instead of, I don't know if it's in this book specifically, but in another book I've read, they speak about how Barack Obama gave this speech when he released a bunch of people out of jail. He let the most people out of prison than any president in like 30 years, but they were all nonviolent offenders. And he spoke about how important it is, how strongly he felt about letting nonviolent offenders out. It was in the book called Locking Up Our Own. He spoke about how important it was for him to let out nonviolent offenders and how these people shouldn't have been in there for that extensive amount of time for these nonviolent offenses. However, when it was time to speak about violent offenses and violent offenders, he had a 180-degree switch and a whole different aspect and belief to it, and I think that is also that's also something that is, not beneficial. We can't afford, specifically as black people, to pick and choose which people who have been criminalized that we care about. We don't, we're not in a place where we can afford, having I don't know how many people know this, but a violent offense can be just something as simple as being caught with weed and a gun. Don't mean you shot the gun. Don't mean you pistol whipped somebody with the gun. It just means you was caught with the gun. A violent offense. There's a plethora of things that enter into violent offenses that don't always mean that somebody was victimized by violence. And also, again, we have to get to a place where we're not stigmatizing people and then leaving them in that stigma. There's people, I've been in fights before. I've been in, I guess what you would consider an assault. I've assaulted somebody and I've been assaulted, or battered somebody and I've been battered. And it's allegedly. No, not allegedly. All right. Anyways, I say that to say a single act of violence does not speak to a history of violence. A single act of violence does not speak to future violence. A single act of violence does not speak to the condemnation of someone. We live in a violent society. This is another thing I've had to be fluid in, change my perception and vantage point about. Every weekend, movies come out in the theaters that's pushing violence on the people. Every weekend, albums come out that push violence on the people. Every week, TV shows come out that push violence on the people. We live in a violent society. So the idea that individuals will not become susceptible to that violence is ludicrous, And so I think that was another negative done by Barack Obama, is that he prioritized criminals. He prioritized people who have been charged with crimes by putting people who are nonviolent offenders ahead on the totem pole of people who are violent offenders. I think that was a mistake on his part. I think that it was a mistake on our part to allow him to not keep that pressure and that leverage on him, and I think that it was also mistakes on his part to not have the moral integrity necessary to try to bring about more of a change. And so, even though I think it's important that we have a black man that was the president, I think that it's important that Kamala Harris is a woman and a black woman that has become a vice president. And I do think that representation is important, but I do not think that representation is absolute and that representation is everything. And unfortunately, the problem that we have fallen into as a black people is that we have given too much credence to representation. So as much as I know that my mom loves Obama, and as much as I think representation is important, I do think that we can fall into a false narrative or revisionist history by praising Barack Obama and the presidency of Barack Obama too much.
I didn't mean to set you up there. Okay, we're gonna wrap this group discussion up. We're about 3/4, I'd say, 3/4 of the way through reading the new Jim Crow. We're gonna finish this tonight. We have a lot of time left. Like a couple of announcements real quick before we end this. Saturday, we're gonna have every weekend this month we're gonna have breakfast We're gonna have breakfast served. Every weekend we're gonna have breakfast served down here in the park. And this Saturday we're gonna be putting up the memorials at 2 p.m. At 2 p.m. So if anybody and everybody come down, we're gonna be putting. I think we have 14 memorials up. We're gonna be putting the pictures up, putting the names up, adding flowers and different type of items to each memorial. So 2 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. Saturday and Sunday, every Saturday and Sunday this month, handing out breakfast. All right, we're gonna pick up right where we left off.
You gonna stop this though?
Stop this though.